It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a playbook, and Shedeur Sanders laid it bare. Ask a loaded question. Wait for the slip. Twist the answer. Blow it up. That's how the NFL media operates. And Sanders made sure the room understood it. He didn't flinch or dodge. He named it, outlined it, and then refused to play into it. His takedown wasn't just bold, it was surgical. And it made one thing clear. He's not just playing football. He's playing chess with a media system that's been unchecked for too long. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. This press conference wasn't a meltdown. It was a warning. Sanders stood at the podium and mapped out the emotional and reputational warfare that media outlets wage on young talent. And he showed what it takes to survive it: discipline, self-knowledge, and a refusal to be molded by someone else's narrative. It's a new kind of leadership that doesn't just command a huddle, but challenges the entire infrastructure trying to control it. The moment doesn't start with yelling or chaos. It starts with a question, a carefully worded one, the kind that sounds routine on the surface but carries weight underneath. Shedeur Sanders is standing at the podium after a game, still processing hits, reads, decisions, and pain, when a reporter frames a question designed to pull a thread that doesn't actually exist. The tone is subtle. The intent isn't. The goal is clear. Stir something up, put distance between a young quarterback and the people around him, and see what happens next. Shedeur doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't flinch. He listens, pauses, and then answers in a way that shuts the entire thing down. He makes it clear there is no division, no tension, no rift. He talks about unity. He talks about accountability. He talks about speaking life into the situation instead of feeding narratives that don't serve the team. It's calm, measured, and deliberate, and it immediately exposes what the question was trying to do. This isn't an isolated moment, and Shedeur knows it. As the press conference continues, he starts pulling back the curtain on something most players feel, but rarely say out loud. He explains how these questions are part of a pattern, how the media often comes in with an agenda, looking to manufacture conflict where there isn't any. The goal isn't clarity. The goal is a headline, something clickable, something that suggests drama, even if it has to be forced. He explains how the process works in real time. First comes a loaded question, framed just loosely enough to sound fair. Then comes a selective quote, stripped of context. After that, the story grows legs online. Fans argue. Teammates are asked about it. Confidence starts getting chipped away. And suddenly a player is spending more time defending himself than developing his game. Shedeur isn't guessing. He's describing a system he's clearly studied. None of this comes out of nowhere. Shedeur repeatedly points back to the influence of his father, Deion Sanders, and the lessons he's been taught about awareness and self-preservation. The message has always been the same. Understand the environment you're operating in. Know when someone is trying to use your words against you. Protect your integrity before anything else. Deion's philosophy isn't about ducking accountability or avoiding tough questions. It's about recognizing when something isn't being asked in good faith. Shedeur makes it clear that he's been prepared for this side of the game just as much as the on-field part. Film study doesn't only apply to defenses. It applies to conversations too. That mindset is evident in how comfortable he looks pushing back without becoming defensive. What makes this moment stand out is how directly Shedeur addresses the bigger issue. He talks about how these tactics disproportionately affect young quarterbacks, especially young black quarterbacks. He doesn't say it emotionally. He says it matter-of-factly, like someone stating something obvious that's gone unspoken for too long. The narratives are familiar. Question leadership. Question attitude. Question whether they're coachable, all without concrete evidence. He explains how damaging that cycle can be. Once a label sticks, it's hard to shake. Every mistake gets magnified. Every comment gets dissected, and the pressure compounds. Shedeur doesn't frame himself as a victim. He frames himself as informed, someone who understands a trap and refuses to step into it. That awareness becomes a form of... As the questions continue, Shedeur keeps redirecting the conversation back to football and responsibility. He talks about reads he missed, protections he needs to adjust, and ways he can help the team more effectively. He doesn't dodge criticism. He owns what's his and rejects what isn't. That distinction matters. It's the difference between accountability and manipulation. He also makes a point to emphasize trust within the locker room, trust between players, trust between coaches, trust built through work, not headlines. He's clear that nothing said at a podium will ever outweigh what happens in meetings on the field or in preparation. The attempt to fracture that trust with a microphone simply doesn't work when the foundation is solid. At one point, Shedeur speaks about sacrifice, and it's not abstract. He references playing through injury, staying engaged even when physically limited, and continuing to lead when it would be easier to retreat. There's no dramatization, just acknowledgement. Leadership isn't always loud. Sometimes it's showing up hurt and still being present for your teammates. He also dives into the mental side of the position, coverage recognition, defensive tendencies, understanding why a play failed instead of just accepting that it did. These aren't the answers of someone coasting on talent. They're the answers of someone deeply invested in mastering the position. That context matters when evaluating the intent behind his words. This isn't deflection. It's depth. The broader critique becomes impossible to ignore. Shedeur essentially lays out how the media economy thrives on instability. Conflict drives engagement. Calm doesn't. A quarterback who speaks thoughtfully and stays grounded disrupts that model. There's nothing to spin if the player won't give you loose threads to pull. He challenges the idea that players should just accept this as part of the job. Instead, he suggests understanding it, naming it, and refusing to participate. That's the part that feels threatening to the system. Not anger, not outbursts, clarity. When players recognize the pattern loses power. By the end of the availability, the tone has shifted. The attempt to bait never lands. What's left is a quarterback who's made it clear he won't be used as a tool for manufactured drama. He hasn't burned bridges. He hasn't insulted anyone. He's simply drawn boundaries. And in doing so, he's shown a level of control that goes beyond the stat sheet. The moment resonates because it feels bigger than one exchange. It signals a shift, or at least the possibility of one. A generation of players more media literate, more self-aware, and less willing to let their narratives be written for them. Shedeur Sanders doesn't claim to be changing the league on his own. He doesn't have to. He's showing what it looks like to stand firm, speak clearly, and move forward without feeding the machine. If moments like this matter to you, if you think conversations around accountability, media influence, and player autonomy deserve more attention, let that be known. Share your thoughts below. Pass this along to someone following the story. And stay connected for more breakdowns like this by subscribing and staying engaged. Shedeur doesn't just walk away from the podium with a few good sound bites. He walks away having reframed the conversation entirely. And what he's pointing at isn't just one reporter or one moment. It's a system that profits from doubt, from chaos, from the erosion of confidence in players not yet even given time to grow, especially players who look like him, especially quarterbacks, especially those who show leadership outside the mold. He's not naive about how this works. He names it openly. He breaks down how these questions are designed to trigger tension between players and coaches, players and fans, players and themselves. He calls out the trap of spinning a quote to generate what's going on in the locker room, debates that serve only the people cashing in on the clicks. He doesn't dodge. He diagnoses. And when Shedeur talks about mental health, it hits differently because he's not coming from a theoretical place. He's been in it. He's watched it happen. He knows what it's like to feel the pressure, not just a performance, but perception. And that's what this media playbook attacks most ruthlessly, the perception of a young athlete's mindset. One misleading quote can turn leader into problem. One headline can erase months of growth. So when he pushes back, he's not just defending himself. He's putting the media on notice that the old tactics won't work on him, that he knows the gotcha game and he's not here to play it. He's also sending a signal to other players. You don't have to play it either. There's power in being intentional. There's strength in clarity. And there's nothing soft about protecting your mental space. This entire approach, This blend of poise, insight, and unapologetic ownership feels deeply rooted in the values Deion Sanders has been preaching his entire life. Deion never just taught technique or work ethic. He taught presence, the ability to recognize your environment and hold your ground within it. Shedeur speaks like someone who's internalized that message completely. He doesn't go out of his way to defend his dad because he doesn't need to. His responses speak for themselves. They reflect the kind of composure and awareness that's not taught overnight. And when he points out that the media's angle was about creating a wedge between him and the coaching staff that includes his father, it's clear this wasn't just a misstep. It was a calculated move and one that failed. At no point does Shedeur suggest that players should never be challenged. That's not the issue. The issue is when the challenge is disguised as a question, but the real intention is to create conflict. That's when it crosses a line from journalism into manipulation. And when a player calls that out directly, it makes a lot of people uncomfortable because it removes the plausible deniability. The real kicker is that Shedeur keeps bringing it back to football. He talks about preparation, coverage, situational awareness, all the things that show he's not hiding behind a narrative. He's doing the work. And that work includes being smart enough to see when someone else is trying to profit from tearing that work down. It's also telling how often Shedeur uses the word we instead of I when responding to questions designed to isolate him. He doubles down on unity. When pushed to speak on personal frustration, he pivots to team execution. That's not just media training. That's a deliberate refusal to feed the monster. He even breaks down how players are coached to speak in certain ways during interviews, but how that can become a trap too, because when you speak honestly, it gets twisted. And when you speak generically, you get called evasive. The system is designed to critique you either way. So the only real option? Stay centered. Know who you are. Refuse to be. This isn't about one press conference gone wrong. It's about a player rewriting the rules in real time. He's not angry. He's not rattled. He's calm, measured, and strategic. And that's exactly why it's so effective. It's hard to manipulate someone who sees the manipulation coming a mile away. By refusing to engage with loaded narratives, Shedeur is cutting off the oxygen that fuels them. No headline, no viral moment, no quote that could be twisted. Just clarity, just intent, just a quarterback who knows exactly what he's doing and why it matters. When asked again about his relationship with the coaching staff, Shedeur doesn't just brush it off. He explains the depth of their communication, how disagreements are handled internally, how mutual respect keeps the foundation strong. It's not a blanket denial. It's evidence. He's showing his work, something media rarely does in return. He also reflects on how this type of questioning isn't just annoying, it's dangerous. Because when you plant a seed of doubt in a young player's mind, it can grow into something that impacts performance, trust, and even future contracts. And that's not accidental. That's part of the plan. Later in the interview, Shedeur talks about the importance of understanding your why you're playing, why you're speaking, why you're responding the way you are. That kind of emotional intelligence doesn't just happen. It's developed, and it's rare to see it coming from someone in the early stages of an NFL journey. He breaks it down further. If your why is external, pleasing the media, chasing validation, it will destroy you. But if it's internal, growth, leadership, purpose, it becomes a shield. That's the mindset he's operating from, and it's what makes him so difficult to shake. He also touches on how this entire process isn't just about athletes. It's about the ecosystem around them. Coaches, families, fans, everyone plays a part. And when the media distorts the truth, it doesn't just affect one player. It affects how people view the team, how trust is built, how futures are shaped. Shedeur's message is clear. Challenge us, but do it fairly. Ask real questions. Seek real answers. But don't twist our words just to create chaos. We have enough pressure already. We don't need manufactured drama on top of it. What we need is space to grow, to make mistakes, to learn out loud, without being weaponized in the process. By the end of the exchange, there's no confusion about where Shedeur stands. He's not here to be a media puppet. He's not here to play a role. He's here to lead. And that means calling out dysfunction when he sees it. no matter how subtle or polished it looks on the outside. His closing remarks aren't just answers to questions. They're a guidebook for teammates, for fans, for young athletes watching closely. He's showing them what it looks like to resist quietly, to reject the bait, to demand better, without ever raising your voice. That's power. You could feel the silence after he finished speaking, not because the room was empty, but because there was nothing left to twist. Shedeur had said everything with such clarity that even the most seasoned media minds knew there was no headline bait in what he delivered. Just truth, just insight, just someone young, but already miles ahead in understanding how narratives are built and how to dismantle them without throwing a punch. He didn't name names. He didn't call anyone out. But the implication was loud. If you come to divide, don't be surprised when unity meets you at the door. His entire demeanor said, I see what you're doing, and I'm not letting you win. And the quiet that followed, that was respect, even if it went unspoken. What made the moment even more significant was how Shedeur framed the media's playbook as not just annoying or exhausting, but as dangerous. This wasn't just about protecting his image. It was about protecting players' mental well-being, their confidence, and their futures. One misleading narrative can follow a player for years. One soundbite can shape how coaches view your attitude, how fans judge your effort, and how sponsors weigh your marketability. These aren't harmless words. They're career-defining moments, packaged for clicks. And when Shedeur emphasized that this isn't new, that young black quarterbacks have been on the receiving end of this kind of framing for decades, it landed with weight. He wasn't just speaking for himself. He was speaking for the guys who don't get the mic, the ones who were torn apart before they ever got a real chance. Back at the podium, Shedeur continued redirecting every attempt to paint cracks in the team dynamic. When one reporter tried to get him to speak on his own stats compared to team outcomes, he cut it off with one line. Stats don't matter when the mission isn't finished. No smile, no show, just principle. And it's hard to bait someone who refuses to place themselves above the collective. This is the part that throws media off their game. When athletes don't take the bait, when they don't fall into the traps, there's no spectacle, no headlines to build off of, and that's when the agenda starts to fall apart. Shedeur wasn't emotional. He was calculated. He gave them nothing to twist. And that's what made everything he said so effective. Later, in a follow-up interview, he elaborated on how much of this manipulation begins with tone. A question doesn't need to be aggressive to be damaging. In fact, the most dangerous ones are usually quiet, casual, and disguised as curiosity. You think there's tension between you and the coaching staff? It isn't just a question. It's a trap, one where any answer can be interpreted as disloyal or deflective. Shedeur responded by challenging the foundation of the question itself. Why is that the focus? Why assume division when the record shows unity? He flipped the lens right back on the reporter and did it without raising his voice. It was a tactical response that left little room for rebuttal. Just because someone has a microphone doesn't mean they're asking with good intent. It's no surprise that Shedeur's mindset traces back to Deion Sanders' relentless messaging around control and self-definition. Deion has spent years preaching that if you let others tell your story, you're already behind. From branding to interviews to gameplay, Deion built his legacy not just on talent, but on narrative control. And Shedeur clearly paid attention. When reporters aimed to reduce young quarterbacks to stereotypes, cocky, entitled, uncoachable, Deion's philosophy becomes a survival tactic. Shedeur spoke about this too, describing how he learned to speak clearly, choose his words carefully, and identify the intent behind the question. Not every trap looks like one. Some are disguised as compliments. Others are framed as opportunities to clear the air. But the pattern? It's always the same. He also laid out, step by step, how these narratives gain traction. First, the interview. Then the clip. Then the social media outrage. Then the talk shows dissecting the clip. And finally, the shift in perception that begins to shape his career before he's even finished developing as a player. It's a cycle that feels designed to grind down any athlete who doesn't play along. Shedeur's refusal to participate in that cycle isn't just admirable, it's revolutionary, because it doesn't come from anger. It comes from deep understanding. He's not out here ranting. He's dissecting. And that kind of precision is dangerous to a system that relies on noise and emotion to get clicks. When asked whether this kind of treatment is inevitable for young black quarterbacks, Shedeur didn't dodge. He said yes, but he followed up with a challenge. He said the answer isn't to avoid the media entirely, but to enter with awareness, to know the angles, to know what gets cut from the final clip, and to be intentional about every word. Because once it's out, it's out. He encouraged younger athletes to learn the system, not fear it. He didn't frame himself as a martyr or a victim. He framed himself as someone choosing to be awake, choosing to lead even when it's inconvenient. And that example alone might be the most valuable thing he's offered to the next generation. As the presser wound down, reporters tried once again to get something emotional, something reactive. They asked how he felt about being misunderstood, about being labeled a difficult interview. His answer was surgical. They can label me whatever they want. I'm still going to show up for my teammates and execute the game plan. That's what throws them off. They expect either defensiveness or silence. But Shedeur gives neither. He gives articulation, confidence without cockiness, honesty without impulsiveness. And it's that balance that makes him so resistant to manipulation. He's rewriting the playbook, while everyone else is still running the old one. Throughout everything, he never makes a story about himself. He always loops it back to the team, to the culture, to the message. And that's where the media can't follow him, because there's nothing sensational about stability. But that's exactly why it matters. Because we're watching a player demonstrate what stability looks like when everything is designed to shake him. And maybe that's the bigger takeaway. That leadership doesn't always look like what we're told it should. It's not always a rousing speech or a sideline scream. Sometimes it's a refusal to feed dysfunction. Sometimes it's just standing still while everything else is spinning and not letting the spin pull you in. The interview ends with Shedeur being asked what advice he'd give his younger self, just entering this world. His answer? Know who you are before they tell you who you are. That's it. No dramatic exit. No mic drop. Just a truth, so clean it doesn't need decoration. That one sentence sums up everything we saw from him in that moment. The ability to see the full board. The courage to speak up without lashing out. The clarity to reject narratives that don't serve the truth. It's not just media savvy. It's self-respect. And that, more than anything, is what the machine doesn't know how to handle. This wasn't about clapping back. This was about standing up, not with noise, with knowledge. If you felt that, sound off in the comments. Pass it along to someone who gets it. And make sure you're tapped in for more breakdowns like this. Because the story isn't over, and neither is the shift that just started.